my fellow Americans. Welcome to Our Fellow Dems podcast, Episode 1, Lori Hawkins, Chair of the Kenosha County Democratic Party. Lori's path to chairing the Kenosha County Democratic Party began when she grew up in a family where public service was common. It became her personal reality when she and her husband co-founded the indivisible group Left of the Eye in early 2017. She went on to advocate for good sense gun laws at the state capitol in Wisconsin and became a Kush Corps group core leader. Her passion for growing and organizing as a volunteer advocate for Planned Parenthood and Wisconsin's representative to their first National Speakers Bureau. Her passion for organizing grew as a volunteer advocate for Planned Parenthood and Wisconsin's representative to their first National Speakers Bureau. She also served on the Planned Parenthood for Wisconsin Board of Directors. Later, Lori was recruited by the Wisconsin State Senate Democratic Committee to run for the Senate District 21 in 2018. Lori came within 8 points of beating the Republican incumbent, and her campaign was one of those instrumental in taking progressive canvassing and representation to western Kenosha County. She remains a fierce advocate of, among other passions, workers' rights and access to health care. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy Episode 1 of Our Fellow Dems podcast. Okay, so I always feel that there's always something going on in the office. There's always some sort of election going on. And most of the time when I walk in here, I'm like, okay, we just had an election. Now we're having another one. And most of the time, I have to go, after I do some volunteering or I come in here, I have to go home and then do a ton of research just to catch up on what's going on. And even then, I feel lost sometimes. And I'm glad that there's an office like this. I can serve as a sort of point of reference and guide people to really understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad this office exists.
I'm glad this office exists too. And I mean, we have people who worked really hard to ensure that it exists. Mm-hmm. And Sally Simpson, who is our vice chair, fought really hard for it, and so did Karen Kempinen. And I'm really glad it's here. We were among the first county parties in Wisconsin to have a permanent office. Mm-hmm. And now it's happening more, but it's a home space. Sure. We get people who just pop in when we're open during our office hours to pick up signs, to see what's going on, but also, especially over the last couple of years, to just come in and know that they're among people who they can vent to, express their fears to, their frustrations. Sometimes people just come in and rant a little bit and leave. But it's a safe space for people to ask questions too. Because like you said, you're not alone. I mean, I feel like I am always behind on my research. There's so much to know because not only is there always an election around the corner, there's always legislation that's coming up. There's referendums, there's resolutions, and there's a lot to know. So I'm really glad that not only we have this office, but we've got board members and volunteers who are invested in being that place for people to learn and just build community.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It seems like we're slowly expanding into some capacity as well. Mm-hmm. So, well, I do have some questions for you.
Okay.
And we'll probably just bounce all over the place, but that's okay. That's how conversations work. But sure. So, Lori, how would you, in your own words, describe what politics is? What is politics to you?
Oh, starting with a 30,000-foot view. Okay. What politics is right now is a means for people building their teams based on power, to build power. That's what it is. And I think, unfortunately, although it's a lot more than that, that's what the general citizen sees it as. Something to alienate of the other, a common, like a zero-sum game of one or the other. And we've gotten there purposefully. But people have purposefully made it so that there's supposed to be this stark difference in political camps. But what politics is, I mean, really is in the big realm, and I think why you're doing what you're doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and everybody else who comes into this office is to make politics a place where we work to elect the leaders who represent all of us.
Sure.
So that's what politics is supposed to be, and that's what I believe we're building it to be. But it certainly is a word that a lot of people shy away from. I mean, when we knock doors, people say, "Oh, I'm not political," I don't. But then they, I'm not political, so I'm not going to run for office. Okay, I'm not political, so I don't follow what's in the news because it's both sides are the same. That's the problem, because when it comes right down to it, within the political system, we aren't the same. We are not the same. We are a two-party system right now. And there could not be more difference between the two parties. It's the difference between night and day. And I think that's what our counterparts seek to make it look like, that this is some sort of a game that we're playing, that it's a game of chess, and it's all about, who can gain the most power, who can build the biggest war chest. And what people who I like to connect myself with know that it's not that. It's really, it's a means to make sure that people are offered, have the opportunity for equitable health care, to make sure that, their relationship is seen as valid and their marriage is seen as valid, that there is, spending among our tax dollars that is, there's transparency in that our elected leaders are, actually putting in their work so that people support them rather than just like connecting with the biggest donors. So I think that, if we're talking politics in the larger sense, there's a tendency for people to just see it as a big, dirty game. And I think that's the intention of, the Fox News sect, or even just the average person who hears, turns on the news for 2 seconds and hears, the sound bites, so that people shy away, so that they don't take part in it, so that they are out of the game, so to speak, and the kingmakers get to make all the decisions. That's what we are trying to correct. Because politics actually is only useful to the common person like you and me and everybody else when people are paying attention and they're involved and they're holding their leaders and potential leaders accountable. So that's a long answer, but that's a good question, because politics as a word it's pretty much whatever the loudest voice makes it, right?
Sure.
I think.
That's what I mean. All that made sense to me.
Oh, good. Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, politics, it seems to will definitely have changed, from my understanding, over human, well, not just only human history, but over American history. Like even looking back to when I go on YouTube and see even presidential debates, going back to before there was color television, going back to black and white TV. There's definitely seems to be a huge difference between the way debates were being run and how presidential candidates debated one another. So if you compare, because immediately I'm thinking of the Kennedy Nixon.
That's exactly what I was thinking of too.
Because that's what that was a big major televised debate.
Yeah.
And then you watch that and then you compare that to the most recent ones back in 2020. You see, wow, there's a huge difference between the way that debate was ran.
Let's go back to 2016. Yeah. Can you imagine? Can you imagine Nixon lurking behind Kennedy like Trump was behind Hillary? Yeah. I mean, come on. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
no, don't worry.
Yeah, in 2020 also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm thinking, man, what happened? Like, what happened throughout all those decades that led up to this sort of high school, not even high school, playground tactics, bullying.
It's a bully pulpit, and it's not an accident that it happened. It's been a very intentional drive for decades, I think. Yeah. And this is where we are. Yeah. And that's the thing, like, and I think the intentional result, the intentional result from that is that people, my vote doesn't matter. It's all a game. I'm just going to sit back. I'm not political. This is too stressful. I mean, that's exactly what our counterparts want people to do. Right? I mean, we've seen it. They, just making things so toxic that people want to opt out, but also, in real ways, like, voter suppression, which is real. The Republicans know that when more people show up to vote, leaders who represent the electorate get elected. And that's not in their best interest. And I think that, I truly, truly believe that, the best thing that I can do in my role is to make myself obsolete. Like, our party, the Democratic Party, should be younger, more racially diverse, more diverse, period. And in order to get us there, we have to make sure that our future leaders of this party, and then hopefully our communities and our state and our nation, are stepping up to move into the spaces that people who look like me and who are my age are in now. I feel like we're in this really exciting place in politics because everything's shifting. And, before something new emerges, there's always chaos. And I think that's where we are right now. So the next thing is coming, and the work that we all do right now is going to determine what that next thing is. Sure. Politically.
You mentioned young people, and from my perspective, since I am a young person, so I'll say I don't feel young, but as a young person, it seems that young people are not really as enthusiastic, as focused, as driven to be involved in politics, let alone vote, compared to the previous generations. I'm wondering, why is that? Why is it young people say, you know what, politics doesn't seem to make much of a difference in my life?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that like the first thing that comes to my mind right there is that politics and voting should have, as somebody who's a volunteer for the Democratic Party, obviously those things are related. But to the average voter, politics and your vote should not be in the same sentence, right? I mean, voting isn't political. Voting is self-preservation.
Sure.
Voting is survival. Voting is showing that you have a stake in things, that you have a horse in the race, that you have hope for the future. I mean, I know that sounds really but I mean, and I will argue that I don't think that young people aren't voting. We saw in the midterms that it was, Generation Z came out and voted in droves. And they're aware. The difference with this voting the Generation Z voting is they are, as a team of, a generation, I think that they are less likely to be affiliated with a political party. I don't think that's bad. I think that
more independent voters. Is that what you're saying? Or
yeah, I think they're independent. I think that they are sick of the two-party system. I think that, you know, they've grown up in an era where, I mean, their parents are my generation. Okay. So I'm a Gen Xer.
Okay.
Proud Gen Xer here. And, you know, I think that my generation and generations before me have always pretty much like, you know, generally speaking, lined up in one party or the next or the other. And our Gen Z voters and, you know, millennials to some extent, although, you know, they're a different generation. And, you know, again, speaking really generally and broadly here, I feel like Gen Z has seen that, you know, maybe neither political party is really representing them and their values. And they're going to nudge parties to the direction that they need them to be. And I definitely feel like the Democratic Party is the party that represents values of more demographics of people in the country than the Republicans. I also know that means that we have to be willing to, as Democratic leaders who are, you know, of a certain age, be willing to not just say, you know, we want to groom new leaders. We want, you know, new leaders to step in and lead the party. Here's the parameters. We need to invite new leaders into those spaces and then back up. And I feel that that's how we get newly energized young voters excited about the possibilities ahead of them as voters and leaders, if that makes sense. Something I've really struggled with because, you know, it's one thing to, you know, go and talk to a group of young people and say, hey, we'd really like you to get involved. And, you know, we'd really like you to come in and just talk about, you know, I want to know what's important to you and, you know, what motivates you and what inspires you. It's another thing to then like take what you've learned and really make it part of the broader discussion. We're trying to, and I know that it's, you know, it's not working as fast as I'd like it to, but we do have people who are, I think, recognizing the authenticity of that ask that we're making of younger people who are paying attention and they're talking to their friends, and it's a start.
Sure. It's a good start. Well, you said in my
You're
opinion.
here.
Yeah, right. So it seems like you guys are doing something right.
We're trying. And that's just the thing. It's like us guys, right? That's the thing. Like, it can't be like, okay, you guys do this and bring people in. It's like, no, we all have to work together and like, you know, open the doors. And honestly, like we always talk about being a big tent. We got to like lift the tent flaps, make more room, really walk the talk.
Sure, definitely.
And learn along the way, because we'll make mistakes for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There was a phrase I heard where the path to growth is you stumble uphill as you grow as a person. But as long as you're going up the hill, as long as you're making that slow and steady progress, we should rejoice in that.
Absolutely. You know? And I think that also stumbling up a hill is a lot easier if you're linking arms with people on the other side of you.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So, when you were younger, I'd still think you're young.
Stop.
So when you were younger, what was your earliest memory of when you first gained interest in politics?
You know, it's interesting. I can't think of like as a young, like as a kid, as a teenager, or even as a young adult, being interested in politics. I've always been interested in seeing how things are working around me. I mean, okay, my mom was a school social worker, so you know, there was always, you know, that service portion of our lives, and she's a lot of discussions about, you know, there's just always talks about who had power and who didn't have power and why, which I think was really important growing up. And then my dad was you know, he was a Marine. He was in the Vietnam War, and he was a firefighter. So if anything, I guess and this isn't really politics, but like I learned early on that the union that he belonged to was what helped us to buy our first house after we rented a bunch of places, that, you know, kept him safe, made sure that there were rules to make him safe when he went into burning houses, that gave us like good health insurance, that was because before he was in the fire department, he was laid off from a series of jobs. And, you know, I can remember really early on my parents talking about, you know, like, no money. There's like, we got very little food left, and, you know, they were very stressed out about, but when my dad became a firefighter, that union really saved that. So I think that my most basic memory of what could be seen as political is that whole idea of organized labor is beneficial to everybody, because I saw it. And then honestly, I would say that I was always a Democrat. I always voted that way. I always was interested in following candidates. But it wasn't until the 2016 election, and shame on me, because up until that night, I really thought that things were always going to be okay for me, middle class, white, married with 2 kids, college educated woman. But it was like, honestly, that moment where my husband and I looked at each other and said, it's not going to be okay. And that it was like, we started an indivisible group called Left of the Eye, because we live west of the interstate. And that was the beginning of being political. And it's honestly been like constant since then.
Sure.
But it did start with like the realization of that, you know, good jobs and protections don't just happen. It's because people have fought for it before us in the form of labor unions.
Okay. Good.
That was a long answer. Just edit all that out if you want to.
No, it's okay. So then with 2016, starting from your parents and your father being in the labor union, you once ran for office. So I'm wondering, how did that come about, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind. Well, okay, so I told you that we started Left of the Eye, and we got really involved, my husband and I did, and just started talking to people out in my Senate district. Actually, it was Western Kenosha County, but just really started inviting. We had meetings at our house, and you know, like, people would just talk about their concerns, and we realized that there were a lot more people around us where we lived who thought more like we did than we had realized, which was really nice to realize. And then I got involved with Forward Kenosha, another bigger indivisible group that, you know, was all of Kenosha, so it was a bigger reach. And then I got involved with Planned Parenthood as a patient advocate, and did some lobbying in Washington for reproductive health care. And the other thing that happened was the Parkland High School shooting. And right after that happened, my kids were really rattled by it, as everybody was. And up until, you know, my kids were just old enough to be rattled by that one. So like they both got involved. And kiddingly, one day, my daughter she was in 8th grade and she was really upset and she had off of school like the next day. It was right after Parkland. And I said, okay, let's go lobby your state senator. Let's go lobby your state representatives then. Because I thought she'd just, she's shy and I didn't think she'd do it. And she said, okay.
Oh.
So we went to Madison and she prepared this impassioned and wonderfully researched and eloquent speech. We went into Senator Van Wingard's office and with her little knees shaken, she told him about what she wanted to see as a citizen in his district. And he stood there with his gun holstered to his hip, with his arms crossed, listening with his ears, and dismissed her. So that was, but I was really proud of her. And really proud of my son too, because he did some things. And it was not too long after that I caught a call from the state Senate Democratic Committee asking me to run against him. And I said, ooh, no, thank you. Really busy.
Yeah.
I've got a family. I just started a new business. I opened a yoga studio. My mom was ill with dementia. She had just died. I was really just kind of like working through all this stuff. I said, I'll find someone for you. Nobody wanted to do this. And, they literally said to me, you will lose. But we need somebody to run against him so that there is no void in that district in messaging. Senator Van Wingard, by the way, just a little message about gerrymandering. The district that he literally approved goes into the city of Racine enough to like literally go around his house and then back out into the county. So it's a very rural, mostly district. So I said, okay. My husband and I had a long talk and we decided, all right, this is what we do. Our kids are watching. We're living during crazy times. This is 2018. I'm going to do this. And that was the biggest eye opener of my life. It was hard. Yeah. It was humbling. We did really well. We didn't win, but we did really well. And it's because people are hungry for representation. And yeah, that's how this all happened, because after I ran, it was like, well, what next? Worked so hard. And, I knew that the previous chair wasn't going to run again. So I decided to run to be chair for the Kenosha County Dems, specifically to help, like just be a person in the county to help the efforts to broaden the outreach. And also to, like I said, I feel like we gotta move things. We've got to move things forward to the next generation, which is not me, but I'm going to help usher it over there. So yeah, it was 2016 for sure, and it's been like nonstop since then.
You ever thought about running again? Perhaps for not that position, but in general?
Right now, I'd say no. But that could change. I have there's nothing out there right now that I'm burning to run for. And, yeah, I'm really excited about the things that I have going on and the opportunities I have right now. I feel like this has been a really, really exciting time for me to build relationships in Kenosha, and start planning with people who I never had the opportunity to do that before. I'm not, sure, some elected leaders, but just also like really great community leaders who have been working really hard for years. This has been a really great time to start building some of those relationships. So, and to do that, I don't need to be elected for something. Okay. So I don't know. Probably not. Maybe. Never know.
Never say never, I suppose.
Right? Right. You should never say never.
Right. Okay. So who are some Dems that you look up to?
I mean, There's a lot. There's a lot of people who happen to be Democrats who I look up to. I mean, I guess I could start up here and then work our way down from like national to local, but I mean, I love the Obamas.
Sure.
You know, they're a powerful team of Democrats, and I feel that Barack Obama in my adult lifetime was the person who made people excited about being a Democrat and for getting involved. Sure. Like just the way that he inspired people who had never been involved in politics before or in just like the electoral process before to get involved. Like, you know, and I mean, I really feel like too, there's no Barack without Michelle. So those two, for sure. I'm going to go, and I'm just talking about people, you know, who are currently around. I mean, if I go back to, you know, a long time ago, there's so many, but at a state level, I would just, Tammy Baldwin, Senator Baldwin, I'm looking at her picture right there. She's somebody who has, you know, as a U.S. senator, has maintained her accessibility to voters, to people who can't vote. Like she takes time to talk to kids. She's inspirational and she's brave. I mean, she's the first openly gay senator, and she's awesome. And she fights really hard. She's thoughtful. She's quiet. And she is deliberate, and I admire her completely, and I feel very grateful that I know her. You know, and then, you know, there's local Dems that I admire a lot too. But I've got to say, like, of course, elected Dems, but I really admire. There's Dems that I'm looking at right now at our county, you know, Dems board right there. Yeah, I just feel like if I have to pick the two that stand out, it's like, you know, the Obamas and Tammy Baldwin.
Nice. Have you met Tammy?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Had a beer with her. She's great.
Oh,
yeah.
Just a beer?
Yeah, it was at convention.
Okay.
But yeah, she's somebody who shows up. Like you invite her to things, she shows up. She advocates for other candidates. She listens to people. She elevates personal stories, which is the most powerful way to win hearts and minds. And she submitted an awesome recipe in our Kenosha County Democratic Party recipe book as well.
Jack of all trades,
right?
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was thinking about this question, the question I asked you.
I think I know the answer.
I was thinking, I was thinking of this question, the question of what's your earliest memory of getting involved in or getting interest in politics. Yeah. And I remember in 8th grade, I would come home from school and then I'll go on Comedy Central and watch like South Park. Cartoons I shouldn't be watching, essentially.
South Park. Love South Park.
And but immediately following South Park, The Daily Show would come on, and this was back when Jon Stewart was still a host. And I don't know what it was. I said, "What is it?" I thought The Daily Show was just like another. It is a comedic, you know, show, but I didn't know what it was. And then I was like, "Oh, this guy's talking about politics, and it's funny. It's hilarious. He made it interesting, but also." He made it informative, but also comedic in a way. Yeah. And I remember watching Jon Stewart almost on a Monday to Friday daily basis, watching him talk about, well, politics and how, well, dumb they can be from time to time. And I was thinking, you know what? It was actually Jon Stewart who motivated me, who gave me that interest in politics but then me being in 8th grade, I lost interest in politics immediately after that. Because I'm a kid, so I went on to go do other mischievous things that kids do. And it wasn't until I was in college back in 2016 when Senator Sanders was running. So that already, like, he then again reignited that interest I had in politics. And I remember when he came to Carthage, I told all my professors, like, hey, so I'm not gonna be in class, and if there's any sort of I already looked at the syllabus, but if there's something else that we're gonna do, just let me know. But I'm just letting you know I'm not gonna be in class. So then I go over there to Carthage, and I see him. I meet him, just like a quick, hey, how's it going? Because he was just going around to other people and saying hello and things like that, and
looking to shovel. Yeah,
and it was interesting to see my first actual national level politician, and I will say that after he didn't get the nomination, I completely lost my interest in politics. So for many years, I was one of those apolitical people. So yeah, whatever. Politics, being the stereotypical young person, yeah, politics is all BS. There's no change in there. Being naive and things like that. And it wasn't until I was in grad school when I stumbled upon Kennedy's inaugural speech.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, who is this guy? I've heard of Kennedy throughout, in school, hearing about who he was and how he was president, how he was assassinated and everything. But it wasn't until that inaugural speech where, once again, not only did that spark get reignited, it went from a match to a huge, almost forest fire like energy of interest in politics once again. And then I dove into the Kennedy history, the Kennedy family. I read numerous books about biographies about John, and then same thing with his brother Robert. And throughout my time learning about the Kennedys, I always remembered his famous quote in his inaugural address of, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And that has been my main motivator to get more involved in politics. And as I really think about it now, I never wouldn't even thought of, well, one, going back into politics, 2, joining a political party, 3, getting involved within that political party, and then 4, having all this now.
Yeah.
So I credit everything to Jon Stewart, Bernie Sanders, and John and Robert Kennedy.
Wow. Yeah. You know what? You say that, Jon Stewart, for sure. Because, and he's still going. If you've seen some of the recent.
And Apple TV.
Man. He's brilliant and funny. And I think that's part of it too. Like, with Jon Stewart, I think that he hit on something that is so important. The work that we do as volunteers for the Democratic Party, volunteers in our community, it's hard, and it's, there's a lot, but it's got to be fun too. Like, you've got to find the fun in it. That's something I always said to my kids, like when they're going through something that's just really hard, I always say, find the fun, find the fun. Not like this is a lark, but that's what Jon Stewart does. Like finding the fun along the way where you can chuckle. Even if you're just laughing at the absurdity of it. And honestly, I hear you. And I think also there's something to be said for, Bernie Sanders is somebody who you really saw as a, like kind of a hero or somebody you looked up to. Seeing that person in person. And I mean, if there's anybody who just looks like a regular guy who has not had enough coffee or sleep because he's working so hard, it's Bernie Sanders. Yeah. And I think that is, I think that's pretty cool. I like that.
I really wish I would have met Kennedy. That's definitely a guy I would have went heaven and hell to fight for.
I think a lot of people felt that way. Well, you're interviewing me, but what do you think the difference? I mean, people were very fired up then. What do you think do you see that happening again, where people are that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there will be other great presidents, but there definitely won't be another Kennedy. You know, what he had was this swagger, this charisma that was just so contagious to many people, not just during his time, but even today. I mean, look at me. I'm still fascinated by how this. I mean, it also helps that he had a rich father. I mean, money helps a lot too, but still, character can take you even further. And I don't know. I still have hope that there's going to be another Kennedy-like president. And will it be anytime soon? Maybe. I don't know. Perhaps. But no, I just have overall in general, I still think there's another candidate out there that can have that same energy and devotion like Kennedy.
Yeah. And I think too, what's changed since then is I feel like people are realizing that you don't have to wait for a Kennedy to accomplish the things that you want to see happening in your community. There's such a new, just surge of people running for school board and, common council and their county boards. And it just, I think that the whole idea of politics being local and government being local and affecting every aspect of your life and, making a seat for yourself at the table so that you can be a part of it is, I think that's a good change from the Kennedy years. I feel that there's people aren't waiting to be saved.
Yeah.
And that's exciting to me because that means there's more people working for causes and just like having those discussions about, maybe we don't have exactly the same idea of what the end goal looks like, but we can share common and adjacent values and visions and work together towards them. I'm excited about that. And I think that's one of the things that comes out of struggle.
Sure.
As a nation, as a community in Kenosha, especially. And I'm excited about that. So that's what I was thinking when you were talking about Kennedy, that yes, that people just look to him and Bobby for the answers.
Yeah, Bob was really underrated. Bob was the underdog in my eyes. I think even himself, one of the biographies that I read about him was when he was campaigning for the presidency. There was one point after some rally, I think he was on the tour bus that they've had. And he sat down and just looked at one of his campaign aides and said, I'm just not Jack. I'm just not him. But still, he still had that same characteristics that his brother had. And I really think he could have made a huge, even a bigger difference in the United States had he not been assassinated. So, yeah. After all these experiences you had in politics, what sort of advice would you give young Americans?
Honestly, like it's even when you say like, oh, your advice in politics, I feel like, all of your experience in politics is what you said.
How about in general? Let's say in general.
Yeah, I mean,
after your life experiences, whether it's in your personal or political life, let's just say in general, what advice would you give to young Americans?
What's interesting to me when I always think like, gosh, compared to a lot of people my age, I have so little experience in politics because I started, not that long ago becoming aware of how what's happening on the news affects my life. And the advice that I would give is to pay attention. Don't look away. There is a tendency for us to be attracted to the bright, shiny thing or the biggest disaster that's happening And then, we turn it off because the next news cycle is in, or we're exhausted and it's stressful to pay attention to. My advice is to don't look away, because while we're looking away, things are happening that are working against us because we're looking away. And by that, I mean, when your county executive appoints people to the Racial and Ethnic Equity Commission who are extreme, who have said out loud that they don't think systemic racism exists, you should do something about that.
Sure.
But if something like that is buried on the third page of the paper, people aren't going to see it. And people think, there must be some reason why she appointed those people. There must be some reason. I'm just going to trust her because she's elected and she knows what's going on. No, I mean, what's happening when we are not paying attention is the advancement of extreme right-wing reactionaries. And that has happened slowly. And we are coming to a place in Kenosha County where that is becoming harder and harder to push back against, because not enough of us paid attention consistently enough and early enough to stop it before it picked up momentum. So that's just one example. My advice is to show up and pay attention and don't feel stupid for asking questions. Because like you said right when we started, there's so much and you feel uninformed. And I mean, I have 2 or 3 people who I know I can ask questions. Hey, I read this and it seems a little off to me. Am I getting this right? Or what am I missing? And, I can't think that, I can't allow myself to think that I'm dumb if I don't know everything that's going on, or I should know everything that's going on. None of us should feel that way. We have to work together, and we have to show up for county and municipal government meetings, and we have to vote in every single election with an informed vote. Because if you just go for the name that's most recognizable on the ballot, you get what you get. And shame on us. So, pay attention, show up, vote in every election.
That's some good advice.
I mean, we have to.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, like I said in the beginning of our conversation, there's always so much going on, and I think one has to accept that you're always going to be behind. You're always going to be behind on what's going on, whether it's at the local, state, or national
level. Do the
level.
best you can,
and that's okay.
Don't give up.
Yeah, just don't look away, like you said. I think that's probably the number one thing is don't look away, even if you're just reading the first paragraph of some news article.
Don't look away and don't allow yourself to be distracted, because that's intentional. And stay the course for sure.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
No, I think that with politics, with the conversation involving politics, it seems prior to 2016, both the Dems and the Republicans were able to have just a regular conversation with one another. It seems like they were good neighbors, friends, and so on. But then after 2016, you started to read about or hear about, I'm no longer friends with so-and-so because they voted for this person. I'm no longer friends with that person because they voted for this person. And I'm just thinking, how do we rebuild that gap again? How do we say, you know what, you're a Republican and that's okay, I'm still going to be friends with you. I still want to be friends with you. Or I still want to invite you to the Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think it's so much you're a Republican, I can't be friends with you anymore. I think with that election in particular, it was, wow, now I know what you represent or what you're okay with having represent you. That was really hard for a lot of us.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I know I had relationships that suffered after that election. It wasn't because of a vote. It was because now I know more about you than I did before. And there's things that I can't unsee. And I mean, I do have people who I love who voted for Trump in 2016. And that was hard because it was almost like this. It was like pulling back the curtain on looking into people, like a depth. And I do believe that 2016 was a time where you had to choose what you stood for. You know, the people who didn't choose are the reason we got Donald Trump. And there was a lot of pressure on everybody to stand up and be counted. That's the crisis, I think. Like, yes. And I talk to state legislators who have been in office for a long time, people in county government who have been in office for a long time. And prior to 2016, they do say, like, we negotiated stuff. We had conversations. We could find a middle ground.
Yeah, compromise.
We could compromise. Yeah, that's the word. Thanks. And I feel like the just blatant disregard and the blatant disregard for whole populations of people in our country to preserve what you have and the power that your people have. And this misconception of a zero-sum game where if, people who don't look like you or love like you do get more rights, that you have fewer. I think that's the part that has been harder for those of us who have lost relationships since 2016, been able to reconcile. And I do feel we're still grappling with that. But I also feel like, those of us who are on this board and a lot of our elected representatives also have worked really hard to make this place a place where we can come and have those conversations. And hopefully, move, and we will move forward. We have to, because we are not going to allow the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Matt Gaetzes of this country to define us. That's what it comes down to. We are in a, we are fighting for who we are as a nation, a lot of us said, electing Donald Trump in 2016, that was really bad. But if we would have reelected him in 2020, that would have defined us. We have a chance to make sure that we define ourselves in a way that we want the world to see us. And we're in the middle of that right now. It's going to take everybody to not look away, show up, and vote in every election.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well said.
Thanks.
Well said. So, Lori, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'm happy to see what we're doing here and what we will continue to do. And what social media would you like to plug, whether it's your personal or as the party as a whole? Yeah.
We talked about how it's really hard to keep up on everything that's going on. I would highly suggest the Kenosha County Democratic Party Facebook page as a great source of information. Board member Jody Muirhoff just works tirelessly in making sure that there's tons of good information there. And also you could see what events we have coming up. We've got a really great event coming up, later this month on reproductive justice in Wisconsin. Sally Simpson and Robin Cullen and some other people on the board work really hard to make sure that there's events that we have. Mm-hmm. So, even if you're not a super partisan type person, these events should appeal to a wide range of people. So our Facebook page, and then also our website, Kenosha County Democrats, KenoshaCountyDems.org. Go there. We have a blog. There's a lot of good topics, and we just have a new team that's going to be submitting blog reports on all kinds of topics. And also you can actually subscribe to our weekly check-in emails so that right. Where we are, what's going on,
what we're up to,
and also like what community meetings should be on your radar so that you can be in the know and involved in what's going on. And finally, we have a very important election coming up on April 4th. That's
my birthday.
It is?
Yeah, the election on my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday. Make sure you vote.
I will.
Okay. Important school board election. We've endorsed Yolanda Santos Adams to be reelected to the school board. And also we have a Supreme Court justice election. It is being called the most important election this spring in the entire nation because it'll determine reproductive rights, voter rights, maps, LGBTQ rights, and a host of other things. So, we ask everybody to make sure that they are registered to vote and that they vote on or before April 4th for Janet Protasiewicz.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah. And we're always welcoming people to get involved. There's tons of stuff to do. We need people to do voter outreach, but we also need people who like to do research and who, want to meet and plan events and, maybe just learn more and find people to talk to. So we encourage people to check us out for sure. We're open. Our office is at 5712 7th Avenue, and we're open Saturdays right now, 10 to 4. We're probably going to be expanding that within we're talking about expanding it coming up to the election too.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and thanks, Andreas. I appreciate the opportunity.
No problem.
Thanks for starting this podcast for us. We're pretty excited. This is a brand new thing, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So thanks for being willing to be a trailblazer for us. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Catch you next time.